second, a test of my faith. How do I fight on and tomorrow face another day? Take this bitter cup from me.
Came to us quite a number of months ago, and at that time he recognized that I was the host of a television show called Comments of Dr. James Haney that is seen in Nashville and surrounding areas. And he thought it might be helpful to his program if we were able to have him as our guest on one of these particular shows, and we were able to do that. And we did what we called a seminar series. I think he and Reverend Mr. Isaac White, a member of the board for this particular organization, decided to come and visit with us, and they gave us what we consider to be an excellent show, explaining some of the difficult problems that we as a group of individuals are having dealing with fathers. Over the last 25 or 30 years, we've rehearsed and we've discussed the very, very same things that Reverend Dockery is involved with in this fatherhood development program. No matter how much we talk about it, no matter how long range it has been, we still find that we have essentially the same kind of problems. And we would like to not only support Reverend Dockery, but to applaud him for being willing to go through the rigors of trying to call people together on a morning like this to at least make us aware of some of the issues that are involved in the absence of fathers and the impact that that has upon our society, upon us as a group of individuals. And in addition, I also recognize that this activity would be held in the chapel at Fisk University. And having first become aware and knowledgeable of this institution as well as being present here back in 1972, I felt that it would give me another opportunity to stand in the spot that at one time such individuals as W.E.B. Du Bois has stood, Matthew Walker, and just a large number of individuals that I've had an opportunity to know personally over the last 20, 25 years. And to add another thing, that my wife at one time worked as an administrator here at this university. So we've been involved with Fisk University, we've been concerned about Fisk University, and we've also recognized the contribution that this institution has made. But after all, it was in 1866 that this institution was the first institution in the southern parts of the United States to be established immediately after the Civil War. And those of you who might not be familiar with some of the things that Reverend Dockery and I have talked about dealing with the treatment that we had to encounter in order that we might be conditioned to undergo a system of slavery for more than 300 years, then we understand the role that slavery has played in our, within this country, as well as the role that slavery has played dealing with us, period. And so it is with that background and that kind of information that I'm just happy to be here and to introduce you to Reverend Dockery, and to say that I have been impressed by Reverend Dockery, not only because of his ministerial experience, and of course we know that he is the pastor of one of the Cumberland churches here in Nashville, but we also know that he's been involved with education, and he's made commitments in terms of moving farther in the areas of education. And so because of that, I also wanted to be here with Reverend Dockery this morning, and to have any kind of, to be involved in any kind of activity that might help him and the rest of you recognize your goals this morning. So it's within that statement of welcome that we now present you to your lecturer for the morning, Reverend.
What we want to do is to introduce, with this lecture, a broad topic. And as you'll find, many organizations and many social groups and even religious groups have in different ways addressed the topic that we're talking about. But I wonder sometimes how well it has been addressed. Different movements have even strived to address the topic and to look at ways to implement some strategies and that sort of thing over the years. And when I say that, I mean out of the context of the African American experience, since we've been in America as a people of African descent. And what we want to do is to look at it not just from an Afrocentric perspective, but from an American perspective. So today what we want to do is to focus our attention as a learning objective. As an educator, we're taught to always point out what your learning objective is. So at the end of the day, what we want you to walk away from here with is information for this first section of the lecture. We have 3 parts. And this first section is dealing with, as you note in your program, the historical overview of male identity in America. Okay? And so what we want you to do is to walk away from this portion of the lecture with some concept or some idea from a historical perspective of what did the framers of the American Constitution mean by the use of the word men, and how does that relate to men that are successful in America, in the family, in the workforce, socially, educationally, politically, economically. So those are the type of things that we want to focus on. Let's begin with the first portion. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. To secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. This is written by Thomas Jefferson, July 4th, 1776, as presented as the Declaration of Independence. The latter quote by the American framer of the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson, implies that every man that is an American citizen has a divine right to equal access to American prosperity by divine providence. As much as many would like to believe that America has reached a point of social equality, the reality for the oldest exploited group in America is that all men have not and still are not treated equal. The African American male collectively struggles with identifying himself as African, American, and even the creation of God, within the context of the Declaration of American Independence. Prior to the enactment of the 13th and 14th Amendments of the Constitution, and in some parts of the North, but primarily in the South, African males and their family were considered to be property of their slave owners. They did not benefit from the constitutional rights of citizenship and were intentionally kept uneducated. Consequently, the freeing of slaves in the South and the encouragement to end slavery in all parts of America suddenly entitled the African male and his family to full rights of American citizenship, which is intricately linked to education. In theory, the one-time property of the founding fathers' prosperity had become their siblings, and in effect, a new brother to the descendants of the founding fathers of America. The African male should no longer be denied political, social, and economic access to capitalistic wealth and all of the American pie by his Euro-American counterparts. Now, the question is, what does it take after 1863, the Emancipation Proclamation, in effect freeing slaves and giving citizenship to individuals who were once considered to be property? We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men. At what point do the African male identify himself as a man as defined and inferred in the Declaration of Independence. What is necessary in order for that to happen? Well, as you look at the Constitution, you look at the Declaration of Independence, you look at the preamble to the Constitution, it identifies some key factors or some key concepts that are germane to being successful as an American citizenship. One of the primary things was owning property. Being able to say that I own a part of America. Well, after slavery, you know, you may have heard that the slaves were set free and they were in effect by law now considered to be citizens. But yet they did not have all the other tools, which were education. Prior to the ending of slavery, it was against the law to teach a Negro how to read. I mean, it was enforceable by death if you did. Well, now all of a sudden, this person that people were threatened by death not to educate is a citizen now. But he is not privy to the knowledge of citizenship in America. He's not privy to what the economic infrastructure of America was, what the laws were, what his social duties and responsibilities were, and what his opportunities were, not only in America, but from an international context. So education became a primary property right of consideration. The next thing was, economically speaking, how was he to go about acquiring the resources that he needed in order to compete with his Euro-American male counterparts? What was necessary in order for him to be able to identify himself, again, not only from an American perspective, but on an international level, in free trade and free enterprise? Well, again, education played a significant role in what? Knowledge of how to go about acquiring those things. So the next thing was socially. What was his role? Before America became a country, there were freed blacks who played an integral part in the forming of America as a nation. A gentleman by the name of Prince Hall was the son of a British leather maker, and his mother was a freed African woman. Gave birth to him and he grew up, and he later came to fight in the Revolutionary War along with George Washington. And George Washington made him aware of certain principles, a certain knowledge, a certain order that was in the minds of the framers of the Constitution. You might know that when America was formed, it was said to be formed out of the desire for independence, the desire to be able to economically develop independent of Britain and its dictates. You may know that when America was formed, they said that they wanted to be able to worship God according to their own conscience. They didn't want to be directed as to how to identify God and to what extent can they worship God. So all of these things were key ingredients to the concept of what made a what? Free man in America. All of which were denied at one point. Now I say that American male need not do is to point the finger of blame to anyone except for himself. Because thank God, the 13th Amendment, the 14th Amendment of the Constitution made it possible now for him to benefit in all the rights and privileges of American citizenship. The question is, what level of knowledge, education does he have to prepare himself to benefit and to compete on that level? So when we talk about the maleness in America, we look at the fact that the founding fathers knew that in order for our young children, our boys and our daughters and our grandchildren to continue this system, to continue this organization, this structure that we started, they need to be introduced to the knowledge of what we did and how to build on these values. And that's where our educational system comes in. Before we went to a traditional public educational system in America, we had a situation where it was recognized as a right for a father to establish a set of values for their children and their family, and have those values taught and reinforced in the context of family. That's something that is missing, particularly for the African male in America. There are a whole lot of reasons why, and we're going to address some of those in the second portion of the lecture. But what I want to point out today is the fact that when we talk about maleness, what does it take for an individual to be a male versus what does it take for an individual to be a boy? Or what does it take for an individual to be a man? And what does it take for an individual to be a father? Again, the second portion of the lecture, we're going to deal with that a great deal. But I just point that out now to let you know that when we talk about historically the concept of maleness and being a male, what we must understand is that as related to manhood and the rights of a man, it's important for each individual to know what those rights are and how to go about protecting. First, identifying, then protecting those rights. We have a lot of instigations in our social context in the African American subculture. We have politics playing a role. Gentlemen, don't get upset with me. We got athletics playing a role. We've been identified as jocks. We're going to give you an opportunity to talk to me about it in a minute. We've been identified as entertainers. Now our young men, all they can do, the only thing they can see themselves being successful at is in the athletics or what? Standing up before somebody, jumping, hollering, kicking, and screaming. And at the end of the day, what have they accomplished? Little or nothing. Oh, you've entertained, and you've gotten pretty worked up, and you may have perspired a little bit. But at the end of the day, when it comes to something sustainable, some value that your children, 50 years from that point, can benefit from, what have you? Can no longer make excuses for our ineptness. We can no longer say, oh, that's just the way we do. And you just got to accept that. You know why we can't do that? Because for generations, some of you are old enough to know that we've been, at least 2 or 3 generations now have passed. And our young folk right now are hostile. They are angry. They're frustrated. And they're ready to go to war. They're ready to go to war against anyone who threatens what they think to be the essence of who they are. The sad part is that they don't even know who they are. They have no idea of where they come from, and I'm speaking collectively now, and generally, and have no idea of what they need to do with that information from the past that will catapult them into the future. So what happens is, they feel as though you're not feeling me, you're not hearing me. So when we see young fellas toting guns and pistols on the street and killing folk and causing all kind of havoc in our community, you know what they're doing? They're letting you know that somebody has dropped the ball. And I'm afraid as a young man about where I'm going to be tomorrow, because somebody has dropped the ball. Now, here's the question. What do we tell our young men about growing up? What do we tell them are the expectations of a man? What do we tell them a father ought to be doing? How do we teach them that? Well, I'm sorry. There's only one way that can effectively be done, and that is by example of the father. I'm sorry, you can't be a father effectively without having an active presence in your children's life.
All right.
It's not enough to say, I go to work 2 or 3 jobs, and you got food in the house, and you got a place to sleep, you got clothes, you ought to be happy. Well, that child is not like a plant without emotional and psychological developmental needs. A boy, when he goes to do what boys doing, if he doesn't have wisdom and guidance, he's going to what? Figure it out the best way he can. Bible said they called the old because they what? Knew the way, and the young because they were strong. Well, he got plenty of energy. And he's just like a bolt of electricity, roaming free in the streets if you don't channel that energy properly. Hence the need for the knowledge of male, boy, man, fatherhood. If we don't do it, guess what? The problems of our community, folk that we know, relatives, friends, cousins, church members, are to be resolved. Guess who's going to have to play an active role in doing that? You and I. That's our problem. That's our problem. If my son is causing havoc in the street, as a father, it's my responsibility to address that. You as his uncle or as a member of his community, it's your responsibility to address that. And I can't get upset with you when you take care of something that I can't see going down. Is that right? It is important that we recognize that we cannot wait on the social services. We can't wait on the governor, the mayor, the president to establish policy to deal with our issues within our families and communities. But we have to use the wisdom of the ages. We've been through some turbulent experience, and it had to have been something greater than us to bring us this far. It is incumbent upon us to use that knowledge in order to develop a healthy language of communication and values from a social context by which we know that by age, from age 1 to 5, your boy ought to be doing certain things. From 5 to 10, he ought to be doing certain things. And from 10 to 18, there are certain activities, there are certain mind-building experiences he needs to be engaged in order for him to be prepared to compete with his Euro and his Indonesian, his Mexican, and all these other counterparts in the world. There are certain things developmentally he has to be prepared for. The framers of the Constitution, I believe, understood that when they framed these words. We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men. Now I looked at that and I said it's interesting that, Dr. Haney, they didn't say white men. You had about 5 different European nations represented that were coming over here to start this new nation. They didn't say German men or Italian men or English men. They said all men are created equal. Which is why it was important, in order to cheat the African male of the right to manhood, to demean him and to strip him of what? Dignity as a man. In the 60s, you saw the signs where they vehemently said, I am a what? A man. And that's good, but it's not enough. There are certain principles and values that you must ascribe in order to be successful as a man. Not only in America,